Defense wins championships, right? Coming up, Notre Dame's three biggest needs on defense in this recruiting class so the Irish can get back to competing at a championship level once again.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish. It is Thursday, March 30th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. As always, this show is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, so if you're watching along, please give the video a thumbs up below and subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening to the podcast, rate the show 5 stars and subscribe there as well. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer for college football talent at Fox Sports. I've also been covering the football team since 2020. In today's episode, I'm going to look at Notre Dame's three biggest needs on defense in the class of 2024. I went over the top priorities on the offensive side of the ball in yesterday's episode, so if you haven't heard that one yet, go check that out once you finish with this episode. We're following the same rules as yesterday, right? This is based on the current construction of Notre Dame's scholarship roster and not taking into account the guys who have verbally committed already. As I said before, verbal commitments are still meaningful despite what some pessimistic people say, but until those guys sign on the dotted line and are enrolled in the school, I think these are the position groups the Notre Dame coaching staff needs to prioritize the most in this cycle. All right, at number one, I think this one's pretty obvious. It's defensive ends / edge rushers, whatever you want to call it. I'm probably going to call them both in this segment. But looking at the big picture, we all know how much football has changed over the past decade plus, maybe even more than that, honestly, at the college and pro level. There's been a massive shift toward pass-first offenses, teams that run everything out of the shotgun, multiple receiver sets, motion, trying to get guys open in space. And the game looks so much different now than it did, say, 20 years ago. I actually remember watching football with my grandpa before he passed away in like the mid-2000s, and he would take it as a personal affront if a team had the audacity to pass the ball near the goal line. Literally nothing would upset him more. He was not a huge fan of the spread offenses and all that. He was very much a 4 yards in a cloud of dust guy, run the I formation every single play. Like, I think if he saw a goal line fade today, it would make him sick. But this isn't new information. Like, you're smart. You know this already. You know how teams prioritize passing the ball now in modern offenses. But as a result of the shift in the way the game is played, we're seeing how the importance of different positions on the field has fluctuated. So quarterbacks, I mean, that's always been the most important position on the field. We went over that a lot yesterday. But the value of great quarterbacks continues to increase exponentially. If you look at the average salary of the top 10 players by position in the NFL, quarterback is far and away number one. But wide receivers have moved all the way up to number 2. And right behind that, you've got defensive ends. So the average salary for a top 10 receiver in the NFL is $23 million. And the average salary for a top 10 edge rusher is just shy of that at $22 million. This tells you that the league thinks wide receivers and edge rushers are the most important positions behind the quarterbacks. And that makes sense because the receivers are the ones catching the passes and the edge rushers are the ones getting after the quarterback to disrupt the passing game. Going into the 2022 season, 11 edge rushers made at least $17 million in average annual salary. 31 made at least $10 million. Like, that is a ton, but that shows you how much these teams value the position. Look at the 2022 NFL draft. The first, second, and fifth overall picks in that draft were defensive ends. 3 out of the top 5. Like, that's nuts. Let's look at it in college. Which teams consistently have the best defensive ends? Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Clemson. And which teams consistently win in the college football playoff? Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Clemson. So at this point, if you aren't getting to the playoff if you don't have a dominant pass rush, it's a prerequisite now. And it's not a coincidence that when Notre Dame made the playoff for the first time back in 2018, they had 2 great DNs in Julian Okwara and Khalid Kareem. Those two combined for 22.5 tackles for loss and 12.5 sacks that season. Add Jerry Tillery to the mix inside, and you've got an awesome defensive line. And that group really helped propel Notre Dame to the playoff that season. In 2020, Notre Dame didn't get quite the level of production from their defensive ends as they did in 2018, but they still had Ade Ugundeji and Dalen Hayes, both of which were drafted in the fifth round, and a young Isaiah Foskey who recorded 4.5 sacks that season, and he was on his way to becoming the all-time sacks leader in Notre Dame history. That's who Notre Dame has to replace this year and in the short-term future if they want to get back to that level. So let's take a look at what Notre Dame currently has in the roster. So they've got Ohio State grad transfer Javonte Jean-Baptiste. He's a nice add for the season, but he'll be gone after the fall. Then you've got Nana Osafo-Mensah. He's another grad student, but he technically has 2 years of eligibility remaining. And I think Nana could have a big season this year, but he's only recorded 3.5 TFLs and 1 sack up to this point in his career. So I'm not sure he's the type of guy you want leading the way on the edge. But then again, he could change my mind this season. The 2 seniors at the position are Alex Ahrensberger and Jordan Botelho. Ahrensberger, he hasn't seen the field that much in his career, but Jordan Botelho is a great opportunity this season to make a name for himself. I actually mentioned him a couple episodes back as the biggest X factor on the entire team this spring because his performance this season could drastically alter Notre Dame's ceiling. There's not a single junior defensive end on the roster, so to make up for that, Notre Dame moved sophomores Josh Burnham and junior Tui Alamaka from linebacker to defensive end. They've also got Aiden Gobira from that class there as well. He was a true defensive end coming out of high school, and all 3 were highly touted prospects coming out of high school, but considering Josh and junior both switch positions and the amount of work Gobira has to do in the weight room to be physically ready for that position and to take on that kind of workload out there, they've all got a pretty steep learning curve at the defensive end position. I'm not saying they won't be good players. I'm just saying it's probably going to take some time for all 3 of them. In the most recent class, obviously, Notre Dame missed out on Keon Keeley, who decommitted from Notre Dame to go to Alabama. That was a major blow. There's no way you could possibly spin that one. Keeley was a top 5 prospect in the entire country. He was a perfect fit for Notre Dame and everything else that comes with Notre Dame outside of just a football. And look, that one's going to sting for a while. He could be a future top 5 overall pick in the NFL draft, and we're still going to be thinking about how we missed out on him. Notre Dame was able to sign Boubacar Traore in this class. He's a 4-star in the 24/7 Sports Composite and the number 2019 player overall in his class, but he's coming off a season-ending injury. They also signed Armel Mukam as well, but he's more of a developmental project. He was a 3-star and the number 539 player nationally, so he's very raw right now. He just hasn't played that much football in his life, but he's got good size, and the hope is that he can develop in the same way that Ade Ogundeji did in his career. So if we're being honest about the situation here, none of these guys really jump off the page, at least not right now. Botelho could be a breakout player this fall, and some of the younger guys might develop into really good players too, but we're going to have to actually see it on Saturdays before we can say for certain. And to be fair to the young guys, like the guys I mentioned earlier, like Khalid Kareem, Dalen Hayes, and Julian Akwara, they didn't play a ton earlier in their career, and it took them some time before they really came into their own and turned out to be the really solid players that we all remember. So it's not really a numbers issue for Notre Dame here. They got plenty of guys in the room. It's just that none of them have shown us that they can be great at the position, at least not yet. Hopefully, Al Washington can develop that young core into becoming very good players because that group definitely has promise. But frankly, Notre Dame can't afford to wait around forever. They need to get some big-time players to come in at that position to get the defense back to where it needs to be in order to compete for the college football playoff. Right now, Notre Dame only has 1 defensive end commit in the class of 2024, and Owen Wafel out of the Hun School in New Jersey. Owen's a low 4-star prospect. He's ranked 367 overall in his class and the number 28 edge rusher. He's huge. He's listed as 6'3", 290. So it's a good start, but Notre Dame still has a long way to go. And it's looking like Notre Dame's best bets at defensive end in this class are Bryce Young. No, not that Bryce Young. The Bryce Young who is the son of Notre Dame legend and NFL Hall of Famer Bryant Young. And then they got Jacob Smith. Bryce is a 4-star out of North Carolina, and obviously he's got plenty of connections to Notre Dame. But Notre Dame still needs to work a little bit to get that one over the line because he's starting to get more interest nationally. So we'll see how that one plays out, but I do think he'll end up at Notre Dame. Jacob Smith is another 4-star. He's rated as the number 183 player nationally and the number 16 edge rusher in this class. He's also got a twin brother, Jared Smith, who plays on the interior of the defensive line. And it looks like they're a package deal wherever they choose to go to college. And based on the reporting that's out there, they're both considered Notre Dame leans, but we'll see what happens. Notre Dame is also looking at 4-star Marquise Lightfoot out of Kenwood Academy in Chicago, as well as Benedict Uma from Avon, Connecticut. I got to say, I used to live right by Avon when I was working at ESPN. And I got to say, I would not have expected a big-time edge rusher to come out of that area, but you know what? I'll keep an open mind. The real crown jewel in this class at defensive end is 5-star Elijah Rushing. He's 6'6", 253 pounds, number 19 player in the class overall, and Notre Dame is going after him really hard. It sounds like Florida's the favorite to land him right now, but when he said his 5 official visits this summer, Notre Dame was on the list, so the Irish are still clearly in the race. If Al Washington and Marcus Freeman somehow pull it off and they get a commitment from Rushing, that would be just absolutely massive for this group. You add in Bryce Young and Jacob Smith, and you've got 3 really good defensive ends in this class. Either way, Notre Dame can't afford to miss on this cycle at the end. It's arguably the most important position on any defense, and it's one where Notre Dame currently lacks the star power needed in order to get to the level that they want to be. All right, coming up next, why Notre Dame needs help on the back end of their defense in a big way. The tournament is heating up, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. I appreciate you joining me here, and you can help out the show by hitting subscribe from wherever it is that you're tuning in from. Today, we're looking at Notre Dame's biggest needs on defense in this recruiting cycle, but if you want to hear more about the needs on offense, go check out yesterday's episode once we're done here. All right, let's move from the front end of the defense to the back and see what's going on at safety. I'm going to be honest, and I don't think this is a particularly hot take. This is the worst recruited position at Notre Dame in the last 5 years, by far. I know they got Kyle Hamilton back in 2019, and thank God they did, because the rest of this list is straight up gross. Let's go back to 2018. Notre Dame signed Houston Griffith, Derek Allen, and Paul Muala. Houston Griffith was around for a long time. He was a pretty highly touted recruit. I'm going to be nice here and just say that he was not the most productive player when he was at Notre Dame, but he was a leader in the locker room, I guess. Derek Allen transferred to Georgia Tech after 2020. Paul Muala transferred to Idaho after 2021. In 2019, you got Kyle Hamilton, stud, all-time great. No notes there on that one. And then you got Litchfield Adjuvant, who transferred to Rice after 2021. They didn't sign a single safety in 2020. And then in 2021, they signed Kari G, who transferred to Georgia Tech after 2021. And then Justin Walters, who just recently medically retired. In 2022, again, they didn't sign a single true safety prospect. And in the words of Taylor Twellman, what are we doing? This segment could end right now. Just look at this list. Well, I guess you can't look at it. Good radio, Tyler. Nice. How do you only sign 7 true safeties in a 5-year span and only hit on one of them? That's insanely bad. Both are bad. The fact that you only signed 7 players in a 5-year span at one position is bad. And then for one out of them to hit is just, it's inexplicable, man. It's truly awful. Notre Dame was able to make up for some of this by converting DJ Brown and Ramon Henderson from cornerback to safety, and both have turned out to be, pretty serviceable back there. Obviously, Kyle Hamilton was amazing and basically saved that position for 2.5 years. And Brandon Joseph was a decent fill-in this past season, but it's unacceptable. We're looking at an unprecedented streak of shit recruiting at safety. Chris O'Leary came really close to overhauling the position entirely in his last class, but a lot of things went wrong, and Notre Dame only ended up with 2 safeties in this class when they were trying to sign 4. We all remember the Peyton Bowen saga. That was awful. He committed to Notre Dame at the very beginning of the year, and he stayed committed, at least publicly, to Notre Dame throughout the entire year, but was very publicly flirting with Oklahoma and Oregon and all these other schools, and you didn't know if he's going to commit to Notre Dame. And then on signing day, he did the thing where he put the Notre Dame hat up and then switched, then put it to Oregon, and then ended up decommitting there and then committing to Oklahoma. I don't love rehashing that whole thing, but you all remember what happened there, and it sucked. It was unfortunate, but Notre Dame had to recruit Bowen as hard as they did, and they had to stick it out until the very end because he was just that good of a player. And I'll give credit to the Notre Dame staff because they were prepared for the possibility of Bowen decommitting, and they recruited 4-star Brandon Hillman to play at safety, and they were really early on him. Like, I know now in retrospect, like seeing Hillman decommit and then immediately go to Michigan, and he was picking up offers from Ohio State, LSU, a bunch of big-time programs. Like, that wasn't always the case with Hillman. Notre Dame was very early on him. They scouted him out well, and they got him to commit. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. It sounded like an academic issue. Hillman did not satisfy the needs to go to Notre Dame, and now Notre Dame is stuck with 2 safeties in that class. Now, I don't want this to make it seem like I'm dogging Adon Schuler and Ben Minich, because those are the 2 guys who did commit to that class, or did commit at safety in that class, and they're both on campus already as early enrollees. And I'm actually pretty high on both of them. The problem is Notre Dame needed 3 to 4 safeties in last year's class, and they're down to 2. So there is an argument to be made that this should be the number 1 biggest priority, just, given how low the numbers are. But given the nature of the defensive end position and how important it is to the team, that gives it the edge. No pun intended there. The fact of the matter is Notre Dame needs to sign at least 3 safeties in this class. Marcus Freeman has already said publicly that Notre Dame will look to add a safety in the transfer portal when it opens up again this summer. But odds are whoever that safety is will be a grad transfer and will only have 1, maybe 2 seasons left of eligibility. Notre Dame's got 6-year senior DJ Brown. He'll be gone after this season. Ramon Henderson, Xavier Watts, both have 2 more years left. And then obviously the true freshmen have 4 years. So numbers are slim now. And they might even be tighter next season if Notre Dame isn't able to land at least 3 guys in this class. But it's not just about adding guys for depth either. Like, Notre Dame needs guys in the back end of their defense who can really play. As it stands, they don't have any safeties currently committed in this class, so the coaching staff still has a lot of work to do at this position. Some names to keep an eye out for: 4-stars Marquise Gallegos and Jalen McClain. Notre Dame is in the mix for both of them, but they're both getting looks from some big-time schools out there too, so they're not locks by any means. They're rated pretty similarly, though. Jalen McClain is the number 250 player overall in the class and the number 22 safety, according to the 24/7 composite. And Gallegos is right behind him as the number 252 player nationally and number 23 safety. If I'm being completely honest, those numbers don't really excite me, especially when you consider how close Notre Dame was to landing a 5-star at the position just last year. But I understand it takes time for the coaching staff to figure out who are the legitimate prospects and for their board to take shape. So I'll hold off any criticism for now, but make no mistake about it, Notre Dame needs at least 2 to 3 high-quality safeties in this class to make up for years' worth of misses at the position. All right, we'll wrap things up in segment 3 by looking at the interior defensive line. Is Notre Dame going to be able to land 5-star Justin Scott? I talked a lot in the open about the importance of having really good defensive ends in college football, and the guys in the interior are also vitally important, even though they don't get nearly the same kind of shine that the guys in the edge do. Defensive tackles, in my mind, are like the offensive linemen of the defense because they're selfless, they're crucial to the success of the entire defense, but due to the nature of the position, they don't have a ton of opportunities to stuff the stat sheet. But we all know, like we watch football, we can see how a really disruptive defensive tackle can greatly impact the game. Like, Jerry Tillery was awesome for Notre Dame, and he was just a game wrecker on the inside. And having a guy like that, like Tillery was so good that he actually did kind of light up the stat sheet. I think he had 8 sacks in his final season, but you get my point here. Notre Dame has lost some key guys at the position lately, most notably Jason Adamiola and Jacob Lacey, but the rest of the group has some potential. Let's look at the seniors here. You got Howard Cross, Riley Mills, and Aiden Kayanana. I'm probably going to mess up that name a couple of times. Howard Cross and Riley Mills, they both have 2 years left of eligibility remaining, which is really solid. Aiden has 3 more years left because he suffered a torn ACL, missed all of last season. Howard Cross is definitely the most proven of any of these guys. He's not the biggest guy, but he's got incredibly fast hands, and he's been really solid in his career so far. I'm excited to see what he can do this season. Riley Mills played the strong side defensive end last year, but they moved him back to the interior, which I think he's more physically suited to play. Riley Mills was on Bruce Feldman's freaks list going into last season, so we know he has the physical traits necessary to be a big-time college football player. The Aiden Kayanana situation is weird because it sounds like the Irish Illustrated guys like Tim Priester, Tim O'Malley, they're super high in him, but in all of their podcasts and some of their reporting, they make it seem like the Notre Dame staff is not nearly as high in him, and there's a potential for him to leave and transfer somewhere else, but I don't know. I don't really want to speculate on that. All I know is he's in spring practice, and for now, I'm going to treat him like he's on the team and plans to be for a while. In the junior class, you've got Gabriel Rubio and Justin Anye. Rubio actually came on kind of late last season. He looked pretty solid. He recorded 17 tackles as a redshirt freshman last year, including a tackle for loss in the bowl game. Meanwhile, Anye, he's barely seen the field, and he was a low 3-star recruit, so to be honest, I don't have super high hopes for him, but maybe he could change my mind. Sophomores, you got Donovan Heinisch and Tyson Ford. Ford was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. Like, he was a top 100 player, top 120 player nationally. We'll see if he starts to put it together this season. Looks like he had to do some work in the weight room to get physically ready to play college football. And if Donovan can be anywhere close to the player his older brother Kurt was, that would be huge for Notre Dame. Like, Kurt he was awesome, man. He was one of my favorite Notre Dame players. I think he holds the record for most games played by a Notre Dame player ever. He was around for 6 years. He forced his way onto the depth chart early when people weren't super high on him. He was a pretty low recruit. He was just like your prototypical defensive tackle. Gritty, grinder. He had the eye black. He looked scary as hell. And then he goes undrafted, but then forces his way onto the field again for the Houston Texans last year. So he's a great story. Donovan, high hopes for him. We'll see what he can do for Notre Dame. And then you got the freshmen, Brennan Vernon and Devin Houston. Both were pretty highly rated recruits. Notre Dame could really use one of these guys to step up this season, but I'm not too confident in what they'll be able to do this season. Houston early enrolled, but he's dealing with an injury, so he's going to be out for spring practice. And then you've got Brennan Vernon, who his story is interesting because at one point when Notre Dame got him to commit, that was a huge deal because everyone in the world thought Vernon was going to go to Ohio State. He went to Mentor, which is a massive public school in Northeast Ohio, big-time football program. Like, they're always competing for state, and Ohio high school football is some of the best in the country. So that was big in the moment. But then after his senior year, his stock started to go down. Like, you started to see his ranking decrease a little bit. And I'll be completely honest with you guys. I watched 2 full Mentor games last season because he was going up against my cousin who plays for Medina. Keep an eye out for Jack Wojciak, by the way. And I watched those games, and frankly, Vernon didn't do anything. Now, to be fair to Vernon, Medina, the team that he's going up against, they go like 5 wide every single play. They don't even have a running back. They pass literally every single play. The quarterback takes the shotgun snap 8 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So it's a little bit different. Like, Mentor was rushing 3, maybe even 2 on some plays and dropping 8 or 9 back on every play because that's just the lineup they were going against. So Vernon was getting some double teams, but I'm just going to be honest with you guys. There was not one not one play during either of those games where I was really like, wow, Brennan Vernon game record. But again, we'll see how he does at Notre Dame. I think I like what he has to say about how he has to earn everything at Notre Dame, so I'm probably going too long in this, so let's move on. Theoretically, every guy I've just mentioned should be on the team next year, so this isn't a numbers problem. Like, the amount of defensive tackles Notre Dame gets in this class will probably have to do with what the underclassmen showed this season. Like I said, this isn't a numbers issue like it was at safety. It has more to do with the importance of the position and lack of proven commodities outside of the seniors in Howard Cross and Riley Mills, who might only be around one more year anyway. Like, if those guys have great seasons, they might go to the NFL after this year. And then it might start to slowly creep up into being a numbers problem. I mentioned Jacob Smith, the 4-star defensive end, and his twin brother Jared, who plays D tackle. Jacob is rated slightly higher than Jared, but they're both really solid players, and getting both would be fantastic for this group. Ernest Willer Jr. is a big name that Notre Dame is in the running for. Willer is a top 50 player out of IMG Academy in Florida. Notre Dame had a good connection with him early on, but we'll see if they can get him on campus again soon. Notre Dame had a commitment from Brandon Davis-Swain in this class. He's a 4-star, but he decommitted, and it doesn't sound like Notre Dame is in the mix for him anymore. The real difference maker in this position group, and honestly the entire class, is Justin Scott. I'm sure you've heard the name before, but let's go over it again. He's a 5-star. He's the number 11 player overall in this class. He's the number 3 defensive lineman. He's the number 1 player, Illinois. He's from St. Ignatius in Chicago, so it's really not far away at all from Notre Dame. And look, Notre Dame is going to be in a fight for Justin Scott from now until, honestly, the moment he signs, and maybe even when he early enrolls. Like, he is that good of a prospect. But the good news is Scott was just on campus this past weekend, and he said it's the best visit out of the ones he's taken so far, which is great to hear. The proximity to home is important to him, which is great. He even said he's a mama's boy, so he wants to stay close to home so he can be around his mom. I totally get that. And it's very rare that Notre Dame's proximity to anywhere actually works in their favor. Usually it's something Notre Dame is going up against because they have to recruit nationally because, let's just be honest, high school football in the state of Indiana isn't that great. But Scott seems to really like the staff, and he might come back for another unofficial visit this spring game with C.J. Carr and Cam Williams, which would be massive for Notre Dame to get him on campus again. The problem is Georgia, because when Scott was he announced his commitment date, was going to be his birthday in late January, and he's getting crystal balled to Notre Dame, and everyone's saying, oh my God, Notre Dame's going to get a commitment from him. This is huge. And then all of a sudden, Georgia came in with an offer, and then that commitment date went away. And you know what? I don't blame Scott at all. Like, I want him to look at all of his options and consider them before making a commitment so we don't have to deal with the Peyton Bowen thing again with Scott, because that's just the nature of the business when it comes to 5-stars. These schools, especially the top schools like the Georgias, the Alabamas, they're going to go after him hard all the way through the end. That's what you're dealing with when you're dealing with 5-star prospects. So Notre Dame's in a dogfight for this one. And frankly, when I saw that offer from Georgia, like, was anyone surprised? Like, if you're a defensive tackle, especially, who wouldn't want to go to Georgia? Look at what they did with Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. Those are two of some of the best defensive tackles to play college football in the past decade. And they both went to Georgia. They were both unbelievable at the college level. So if they were to get Justin Scott, like, if he's looking at those guys and thinking, wow, that's who I want to be as a player, like, I get it. So Notre Dame wants to win national championships. We know that. But in order to be the best, you've got to beat the best. And in order to beat the best on Saturdays, you've got to start doing it on the recruiting trail. Notre Dame hasn't done that a whole lot lately. And Justin Scott is another test case for this theory. They lost Keon Keeley to Alabama last year. They can't afford to lose Justin Scott this year. And Notre Dame is going very, very hard recruiting the defensive line in this class. According to Pete Sampson, Notre Dame has already offered over 40 different defensive linemen in this class, and that number could go up as this cycle goes on. So I'm saying it's the number 1 and number 3 priority in this group. Safety, obviously, at number 2. But it's clear that the Notre Dame staff sees it the same way, and I'm hopeful that they can get it done and bring in a really solid recruiting class this year for Notre Dame. That's going to do it for me today, and that's a wrap for this week of Locked On Irish. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. I will be back on Monday of next week to go over Notre Dame's first and only full practice open to the public, which will take place this Saturday. Outside of the blue and gold game, that practice is going to be the most we'll see from this team this spring. So I'm sure there's going to be plenty to talk about after that. And I'm hopeful to have a guest on as well, someone who's actually at the practice, because I will not be in South Bend this weekend. On the way out, remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On Irish, on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod, and my personal Twitter account at Tyler Wojciak. That's at Tyler, Wojciak. For your second listen, check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball, where experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court, plus hear from big-name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. That's Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you on Monday.